Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products. Recorded April 28th, 2021, 6:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hello, Franklin. How are you doing?
Doing good. I'm getting ready for a Microsoft event tomorrow that I get to watch, and Microsoft was nice enough to send me a nice Azure storage mug.
What event that you participating in that you get a storage mug?
I'm just listening to it. The Azure Storage Day is tomorrow on April 29th. I was one of the first ones to register, so they sent me a mug and a T-shirt.
And a T-shirt. And I bet the T-shirt was in the mug when you got it, right?
No.
Or was it? Okay.
Nope. So yeah, that's good. So plug them for tomorrow, and I'm sure that when people hear this on Monday, they'll be able to go back and watch the recording of it.
Watch what on Monday? Our podcast, you mean?
When they listen to our podcast on Monday, this event will have gone by. So then I will put a link in for the event so people can go back and watch the event.
It seems to me since you've been doing the editing, man, the podcasts are getting published later and later. I don't know. They usually get published like the same day. Now
no,
2
they
days
get
later.
Monday at 11. We are consistent, just like Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock. Consistent.
Okay. I think Edward's volunteering to do the post-processing from now on.
No,
Edward did volunteer to hire someone to do it. And Franklin's a cheapskate. He's like, absolutely not. I'll do it. I'm like, all right. So, but hey, man.
If anybody's going to make Edward look bad, it's going to be me.
Absolutely. And he doesn't have to work hard at it at all. How was your week, Franklin?
Good. I'm trying to think what I did this week. I've been doing my class, the offensive security class. That's really what I've been focused on. So,
yeah.
How about you? Did you, let's go back to Discord and figure out what we had on your to-do list for this week.
Let's do that. Sure. Since my Discord is not up and running, I have no idea. I did something with I was trying to do URL blocking with MDE, and I broke Discord or something, so I don't even see it popping up anymore.
Does Windows Defender impact WSL?
That was not the question last week.
Yes, it was.
No, that was an older question. There was a different question last week.
It was a different question. You're trying to trick me. No, you can't
Where
have my
was I
soul.
last week? No, yeah. What was the question last week then?
The question was, does Microsoft Defender for Endpoint protect WSL or the Windows?
That's what I just said.
You said impact.
Oh, well, okay. Go ahead.
Splitting hairs, just like that. So, as I take a swig from the cup of knowledge and truth. Oh, that's good stuff. Yes and no.
Okay.
It will extend antivirus protection to WSL1, but not 2. The difference is WSL2 is based on containerizing. And it can't protect it. That's why. You'll notice that MDE doesn't protect containers. Azure Defender for servers Azure Defender for Kubernetes or containers will do it, but MDE will not do WSL. I mean, I had a whole thread of folks like, oh, WSL1, but not 2 this. Well, if you use the right distro, so finally me and one guy filtered through all the noise, found some more emails, and we came up with our own conclusion of there are more people that said no for WSL2, and there were a lot of people said, yeah, we can do it in 1.
But you should still get some protection writing to the mount/c directory.
Well, some protection, but I think the question is specifically talking about the antivirus extensions, being able to take care of that. Not that we're going to consume the whole podcast about this, but let me give you a little bit of just opinionated perspective. Okay, OP. I'm down with OPP, right? Overly opinionated perspective, right? If you're running that, you're essentially running a container in a virtualized instance of it, so it's not persistent, right? Right? Persistent. So in the event that a negative security nefarious hacker, Brodie, somebody, right time, right place, right payload, right exploitative action can attempt to do that, would mean there to be a lot of things lined up. Number one being, you would have to run WSL in a manner that is persistent, meaning I'm doing it for something that's going to take a minute, so I'm not going to shut it down. That's a server task type of workload. How long are you going to run it? If I'm doing it because I'm running some bash or I'm doing a couple of things. So the chances that you're going to run WSL on a long term basis, not that it's impossible. Anything is possible. Not everything is probable. But let's say it's not highly probable, but it happens. Then you'd have to expose that to the internet, right? To somewhere that it is being exposed, and or if you are on an internal segment network and someone's already in there, you got bigger problems where they're scanning and they find what they believe an unprotected Linux workload, meaning that this workload's been running for a while. Someone's been in your infrastructure for a while. They're nexting you to death or in mapping you to death. They find this unprotected workload, and even if they did, if they attack other machines and you are worth your weight in security, you should start getting crazy things like, wait a minute, something's attacking me from an IP address that's on my segment, and then I would go out and do a quick scan on the network, ping scan, and go, wait a minute, that's the IP address of my Linux machine. So I don't think it's super important. I think that question that was given to me was from a customer, and I hope they're not listening, was trying to stump the chump. That's what it was. Stump the chump. Right. Because if you go back and say, can we protect Windows Virtual Desktop? Yes. Can we protect virtual machines? Yes. Can we protect Linux? Yes. But I'm running WSL. Wait a minute. If you're running WSL, you're probably someone that's administering the machines anyway, and you're probably a person that's skilled in IT, not just the average Joe. So why are you even asking this question? Stump the chump. Okay, you stump the chump. You made me go out and waste some cycles to go find an answer for this. Am I better because of it? You know what? No, I'm not. But I realized had I not run this answer down, Franklin would have rode me. So I got it done.
Well, it's all in Discord now, so we're tracking you. So
Yeah, it's there forever.
If this is the worst you can figure out about me in my past, I'm good to go. I can run for office.
So what else you got going on this week before we get to our guest?
I've been listening to another good podcast called Security in 5, not Security in 5, but I'll send it to you and put it in notes. So they're building out a lab, and I said, you know what? I've never installed pfSense. I've never installed Security Onion, and I think you and I talked that MITRE, the nonprofit that does the evaluation of security products, testing, have a bunch of tactics. And they also have another branch, which is called MITRE Ingenuity, which is the for-profit side. The for-profit, and they're two separate entities, right? I've worked with both. They're all cool, too. Real cool people to work with. I've been in DC with them. They have a MITRE course around attack methodologies, evasion, and stuff like that. And I think I told you, Frank, I like the course outline. I think I'm going to go ahead and take that course. Let's see. What else? I think that's it. Oh, I wrote a cool MCAS policy. Well, no, it's a policy, but there's a feature in MCAS that if a user is using an application that is unsanctioned, you could tag that application so that if someone gets on it, pops them a banner to let them know that this application is unsanctioned, should be used here. And then you can also tag that application both built into the product or one that you designate right yourself, and you can let that user know that application usage is being monitored and everything that interacts with that application. And I'm like, I sort of knew about it, but since I've never done it, couldn't say I did it. It's actually pretty cool, and it's about to be enhanced. On that note, the very person I reached out to at Microsoft who could help me with this is going to be on the show. It's going to come out. So he's going to be on the show. Well, we got May booked out, right? Almost.
Yeah, something like that. Hey, so since you brought up two technologies that people might not know what they are, what is pfSense and Security Onion?
That's the good thing. pfSense is a firewall, right?
Okay.
Linux-based firewall, right? And you can actually run it on. Well, I guess it's Linux-based too, but I'm going to put it on a IoT device, and then I'm going to use Azure Defender for IoT to do a couple things, or CyberX, your favorite product. Since you're still paying for it, I'll put it in your environment.
Oh, I canceled that subscription. Don't worry.
And Security Onion, when I was taking the SANS GA555, isn't that a logging aggregator and essentially a poor man's SIM of sorts?
Well, Security Onion is Linux distro with a lot of different tools on it.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can, deal with, I forget all the different tools that are on there, but so then you set that up so you have your own SIM all out of the box. You just get the image, you're up and running.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've never ever played with it like that. I've come across it in some of my readings and a couple of things I've encountered. But the people that were talking about it were quicker to say this is not Kali, right? It's not Mint. Kali's one of the top distros for hacking, Metasploit, and wireless.
That's offensive. So it's more like what you're looking from a soft elk if you're used to SAN stuff.
Yeah, and I like Mint from a network penetration, Linux distro, right?
Really?
And Mint's not bad. And Mint is one of those friendly distros. You don't have to go through all the grep stuff.
Oh.
You can have super dual boots. Make it the base one, and it'll allow you to dual boot as many Linux distros that come up. So instead of having to go in and have crazy partitions and greps, you can just do it there. It's good. So I'm gonna play with that this week. You put that on Discord. Take that to Discord. How about that?
All right. So we have a guest this week. Would you like?
We do have a guest. So you'd be surprised. Fools rush in, right? They'll just, without doing any research, they'll just come on, right? I promise them cash and glory and all this other stuff, and they'll just come here, right? No, I'm just kidding, bro. I listen, I got a sense of humor. I'm self-deprecating too, right? So I make as much fun of me as my guest. So Brodie C is a security practitioner, expert, years of experience, new to Microsoft, but I'm going to let him do his intro. His claim to fame that he is north of the American border. I think that's true, right?
That is true, yes.
And he comes to us by virtue of listening to our podcast, some form or fashion, but he's also tight with Matt Soseman, who's a friend of the show. And Matt is a person who I greatly admire his security chops. The ability to, I won't ever say dumb down security, but Matt totally makes the practicing of security unintimidating, right? Because a lot of people want to adopt any of this stuff because I don't want to do that, right? Matt Soseman has a gift, and he gets in it, right? He doesn't sleep ever, but that's okay, right? So, Brodie, I won't do you justice for who you are, what you do, what you like and stuff. So I'll let you do your own intros.
Well, I loved your intro, to be fair. Thank you. I've been called worse. Really appreciate it. Red Solo Cup Consulting. Cheers. So yeah, mine's Brodie Cassell.
Storage.
I'm jealous of the cup, actually. Is that like a Yeti mug? Or is it just
it's good. Good mug.
Like, that's great. You got to rock that every time now going forward, Franklin. Yeah, that's really cool.
Sure.
Yes. So like Edward said, I joined Microsoft about 4 months ago, almost 4 months. And before that, I was working with a partner. Shout out Longview Systems. Love you guys. And I've been working on Microsoft Cloud and security for a long time now. Previous to becoming a consultant, I was a sysadmin, infrastructure manager, and the first time I got on Microsoft's kind of cloud ecosystem was when we lost power. We lost power in Banff, and it was an extended outage. And that meant email went down, and email was, how our remote ski lodges communicated. And so my boss the next day was like, "Why are we managing our own exchange?" And I just light bulb went off. And then from there, I started to learn about, hybrid exchange, migrating to the cloud, et cetera, became good at it. And joined a partner and started specializing in Microsoft security products after Longview flew me out to Redmond for the enterprise mobility and security partner training, which blew my mind. It honestly blew my mind. It was the first time I was at the campus, which was really cool. Definitely spent a little bit too much time in the store, but that's okay. They gave us a break.
Hey, when was this?
That would in the before time, so 2019.
And that's where you met Matt.
No, you know what? I'll get to Matt. I actually haven't met Matt in person, but so anyway, I went to the training and blew my mind. It was 4 days. Met some really cool people, and I had no idea that Microsoft was advancing their security products in this way. There's that old stigma of Microsoft and security, right? You still get it with some smaller clients, who maybe think we're back in 1995, but what they were doing at the time was just it was mind-boggling to me. So the second I got back, I said that's what I'm going to specialize in consulting. And first my boss was like, great, well, if you want to be a security pro, maybe you should look at getting your CISSP. And I'm like, hey, that's a good idea. Didn't know what that was at the time. So I wasn't exactly a great student. I never really studied before the CISSP exam. So I put in about 250 man hours, cover to cover on the official textbook, podcasts, ebooks, multiple YouTube resources. And I passed it first time, which was awesome. That's a really hard test. It took me all 150 questions. It was tough. I was sweating. And, back when you could go to a test center, right? So every hour I had to go take a quick water break. Like, oh man, like this is the test, this is a big deal. And it's not cheap, right? And you want to pass it. So that was interesting. So anyway, I got it and I was very happy. And then I'm like, okay, well, the next thing I want to specialize in is Microsoft security. And so, the MS 500 was one of those obvious exams at the time because they didn't have the SC exams. And so I'm like, okay, well, what did I do to pass my CISP? Well, I went online, I read, I studied, and I looked for podcasts. So that is exactly why I found this podcast. And sure enough, the day that I searched for Microsoft security on Google Podcasts was March 9th, 2020. And that was the first episode that you guys put out. It was literally that day that you guys put that out. And I'm just like, cool, well, here we go. And there's also the Azure security podcast, which is also great. But I wasn't doing the AZ 500. I was doing the MS 500. So that's what I was focused on. So that's how I found this podcast and videocast now, if you want to call it that. And that was great. And then you had Matt Sozman on, and that was the first time I had learned of Mr. Sozman.
Oh, okay.
And his videos helped me immensely on not only studying, but skilling up in these product areas. He has an amazing way of explaining things, breaking it down, his demeanor, his, I'm here to help you attitude. It was awesome. And so I would just watch all of them, right? Like every single one. And, he'd put out a bunch. I'd always like all his, videos on YouTube. I was that guy, right? Subscribing and everything. And eventually, was specializing, things were going good. And then there was an opportunity to join Microsoft and just couldn't pass it up, right? Like that's what I was specializing in. Might as well, put my name in the bucket and see if I could get in. And I got the job. And the first week I got the job, I reached out to Matt Sozman and I'm like, I've been a fan for a long time now. And, you and others in this area are one of the reasons why I was able to be so successful and be able to make a career kind of out of this solution stack, right? So we're chums now and say we're old friends, but I'm sure one day I'll look forward to an opportunity where I get a chance to meet him in person and thank him and buy him a Coca-Cola or whatever he drinks, as a thank you.
He drinks Coca-Cola.
Yeah,
so what do you do for Microsoft?
Sure. No, good question. So I was a consultant in my previous role. I'm in Microsoft Consulting Services, based out of Calgary. One of the good things about COVID, and I'm say that with everything being considered, is that Microsoft kind of allowed more roles in the organization to be remote, which was great because I really, I've been to the Puget Sound area and it's really nice, but don't really want to move. I like where I am. My wife and I, we bought a house. We're very happy. I'm close to great snowboarding, friends, family, etc. So it's a fully remote gig. And there'll be some travel. I'm thinking 2021, there'll be some travel where you show up maybe at the beginning of an engagement with customers, shake hands, kiss babies kind of thing, but I don't think it's like bums in seats 5 days a week flying back on the weekends anymore, right? I think that's we're past that. And if your organization has that mentality, I think that's changed now for the better, I think, going forward, cost savings wise and everything. So if you can prove you're a high performer and working remote and develop a good relationship with your customers, I think that's what's most important, right? So
I'll give you one more easy one before we get to the hard ones. So what do you do for the customers?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm engaged with only one customer now. I've got a few more on the way. And the project was a Greenfields E5 security engagement. So this particular customer, everybody knows them. I can't say the name, obviously, but they were hit hard by COVID, right? Cost-wise. So they have and are looking to remove about 40 siloed security solutions and consolidate into Microsoft's E5 stack, which is like the Microsoft security story, right? I don't know if you listen to the, what's the podcast called? Pivot with Scott Galloway's Prof G, but he calls it a rundle, a reoccurring monthly bundle. And Microsoft's got one of the best rundles out there, the E5, right? Everything from your productivity through to your security, et cetera, compliance, which I know you want to talk about. So this customer chose to upgrade from E3 to E5. And originally the engagement was Defender for O365, Defender for Endpoint, guest access, conditional sharing, data loss prevention, and I think there was one more that I'm forgetting. Yeah, that might have been it. And then it's, so two of them, like Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office 365, I was familiar with because that's what I was working on prior. But the data loss prevention and compliance stuff, like never touched it before, right? So the only time I really started to dig into it was when in my old gig, I started to do those Microsoft security accelerators. And they would talk about the new unified portal, right? And it would just kind of be a mention like, hey, by the way, we've also split out the compliance stuff to the new compliance portal. So just out of curiosity, I would go in. It's like, oh, compliance, cool. This is stuff I learned about in my CISP course. I didn't really understand the compliance frameworks a lot before I took that course, to be fair. And now it's a big part of my career. So anyway, so it was just neat. It was neat how they split up those portals. And, I kind of just dabbled in it a little bit out of curiosity. And then my current engagement really shifted heavy towards information protection, DLP, et cetera. And so I had to skill up in that, right? So went to AKMS Learn, leveraged some Matt Sozman videos, talked to some other consultants, architects. And now the way things are kind of lined up, unless things changed, my next engagement is DLP. And the engagement after that I've got tentatively booked in mid-June is also DLP. So I guess that's what I'm doing in the near term. So it's been interesting to learn that for sure.
Yeah. Out of everything you said, what surprises me is you did not mention cloud app security.
I would now. So to be fair, and I really like to troll Edward here, but my last engagement at my old job was cloud app security architecture, and it would have been a deployment too if I'd stuck around. I'm a big fan of that solution. But big fan, I think everybody needs a CASB, and hopefully it's a Microsoft CASB, but I think everybody needs one, especially when you come from the sysadmin world and you just think about all those times those renegade departments are using Dropbox and they're just, everything, here you go, sync my whole computer, right? And the fact that we're all working from home right now, leveraging all kinds of third-party SaaS apps, people can just email anything they want outside of their organization. If you don't have anything to catch that, that's massive data leakage. That's not good, right? And that makes it easy for insider threat attacks. It makes it easy for a whole bunch of issues. Not to mention you're not compliant, right? So it's a big deal. It's a good product.
It is, especially when you combine all the other tools to say, okay, identity is the linchpin, right? I think some of the old cliches used to be identity is the new perimeter, but identity is the linchpin. If I can break your identity, I can break you. right? If I can break your authentication mechanism, right, and I can impersonate you a spoof, no one solution is going to catch it
Right.
in a timely manner, right? If you're just running only an XDR, give it enough time, you may eventually catch something. If you're only running an identity solution, give it enough time, you may catch something, assuming you're not running MFA. If you're only running a CASB solution, give it enough time and you can filter the noise. But when you get them all together, what you're doing is reducing that amount of intrusion from infiltration to detection. So when you combine cloud app security with MDE, especially, right, and then maybe throw some MDI, Microsoft Defender for identity, but especially around MDE, the way I generally catch it is, why is this identity using a device that I can go back and look at the history, like that's not the corporate device, or that's not the device that's been enrolled. And they're doing stuff from this device. And then that device can also give me a bunch of clues, right? So yeah, a CASB, somebody's CASB, because shadow IT is not going away, because the only way you're going to get rid of shadow IT, in my humble opinion, you got to get rid of budget. And you got to start really locking people down, right? Because all of these, yeah.
So
go
let me
ahead,
ask you, what is compliance and what is DLP?
We're shifting gears. Okay. Well,
yeah,
first,
we want to talk about what you do. What's your superpower? What do you like to do? Give us some interesting.
Well, I mean, we mentioned DLP and we mentioned compliance. You know, to me, compliance seems like somebody walking in with a clipboard and, you know, checking things off and then walking out again. I mean, so what
I guess
is
it used
this?
to be. I guess it used to be, right? So, and just quickly before I get into that, I was on an ISACA webinar recently, and there was a gentleman who was presenting on, you know, auditing very large financial and government institutions. And I asked him, you know, there's a Q&A, and I asked him, what is the one thing that all of your clients have in common when it comes to a security issue that you see? And he said it was data loss prevention and data exfiltration by far. It seems to be falling by the wayside for a lot of very large organizations that are government mandated. And so I thought that was really interesting, kind of leads into this, you know, amount of work that I'm doing in this space. So yeah, well, there's compliance frameworks, right? Like the most popular these days is GDPR, which is a pretty all-encompassing compliance framework for European citizens, and a model for what, you know, the CCPA, the California Consumer Protection Act, is being based off of. Canada is developing its own compliance framework. They're probably going to borrow a lot of what GDPR did, which was, you know, the big groundbreaker, right? PCI DSS, fun fact, you know, if you don't know already, that's the credit card compliance framework. And the only compliance framework, unless that's changed since I took the CISP course, that is actually managed by the private sector, managed by the credit card companies themselves and not the government, which is really interesting to learn because, you know, it's within their best interest to keep it that way because they kind of have control over it, right? And so in a way, PCI DSS ends up being enforced and audited against more strictly than some other compliance frameworks, of my understanding, because those private the big credit card companies, it's within their best interest to ensure that their customers are adhering to that. So that was really interesting to learn about. And then, you know, there's like the customer I'm working with, they're very interested in passports, which vary from country to country. That's involved with GDPR. They're also very interested in discovering national identification numbers within their system, which, by the way, is a night of Wikipedia in itself, learning which countries around the world have national IDs or don't, depending on their privacy rules and what they're called. Like Ukraine and Russia, they have domestic and international passports, and technically their domestic passport is their national ID. But then, you know, the United States, they use social security number technically is not their national ID, is my understanding. It's used that way, but it's technically not supposed to be a national identification number. And same thing as Canada, we have the social insurance number, but it was never designed necessarily be a national ID number. And so I'm learning all this information. It's very interesting.
Yeah, the social security number, if you go listen to a good, you know, NPR podcast, you'll get the history of the SSN. It wasn't supposed to be that, but I think it was what was available, right? You could easily say that the social security number is a national one and your driver's license is a regional one, right? Because my driver's license can really identify what state I'm from, unless you got multiple driver's licenses. And I don't know if that's illegal or not. because at one time I had like 3 or 4, right? Because I'm driving these places with your driver's license. That was years ago though, right? So, but
so what comes with Microsoft compliance?
Well, that was going to be my question. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then your other ask was what's DLP, data loss prevention. The controlling through policies discovered information that shouldn't leave the organization, or not even leave the organization, but be shared between parties in the organization who aren't privy to that information, or who shouldn't be. Where that information ends up being stored, who can access it. You look at the MCAS DLP capabilities. Like my clients, that they use Slack as their primary collaboration tool, and so they want to eventually leverage MCAS to prevent people from just putting credit card numbers in Slack, right, in the text box, so they can remain compliant, right? But the Microsoft kind of Office 365 DLP work that I'm doing right now, it's who has permission to view what, right? Maybe there's different levels of confidentiality. This customer has a similar confidentiality structure as Microsoft: highly confidential, private, and public. So who's privy to what based on those levels? They have they're a credit card. I think it's PCI DSS level 1. Don't quote me on that, everybody out there. But it means they process and store numbers. So they have a whole separate area that's set up just for PCI DSS transactions on its own, subnet, on its own repository. You've got to have an error lock in between that repository or that environment and their corporate environment, right? And then terminal servers to access it. And then that's obviously a big deal, right? How you can actually move into that other environment. It's similar to I've worked with some critical infrastructure companies, and as you get closer to the power grid, you're in siloed environments, moving closer and closer to the stuff that can really, cause a big problem if you get there, right? Or if a bad actor got there. So it's about controlling those gates, and who has access, and air gapping things, right? So the DLP situation I'm working on is similar to that in many respects. And yeah, go ahead.
I early in my career, you brought back some good memories. That's because I did good work in that. But I remember doing about 2.5, 3 years of just primarily majority working with credit card transaction companies. So you absolutely correct. I have designed that the lack of operational bleed between transaction networks and line of business networks, right? And you're right, the air gap was a pain, right? Then literally before they could figure out how to design it, the way that you had to transfer information, that there was a room you went into and there was 2 Ethernet cables. And then if you need to get something, someone had to go in there, sign in, plug it in, and only 2 VLANs between it were talking, and they would verify that they unplugged it and then sign out, right? Before they figured out, they started doing virtual sessions. So if you were on the transaction side, you could only get access to the other side if you spun up a virtual. They were using Citrix. And so they never had persistent endpoints that would allow you to be able to have an attack between these sides. That's so, golly, that was years ago. I'm sure it's gotten better now. And let me ask you a quick question. You're talking about all these controls, processes, regulations, frameworks, and what you're looking for, but how do you interact with that? What technologies are you using to find these known, identification number, credit card numbers, and things like that? What tool sets are you leveraging within the Microsoft stack to be able to go do your job?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if they call these tools the same thing in other solutions, since this is my first foray into information protection, but on the Compliance Center and under Microsoft Information Protection, there's a number of out-of-the-box sensitive information types that Microsoft provides. I think it's over 100. It's somewhere in like the 120, 130 range. And these include credit card numbers, passport numbers for highly populated countries, national IDs. There's some other ones in there around medical stuff, driver's license numbers, etc. So there's a bunch of out-of-the-box sensitive information types that Microsoft, if you have access to the portal, you have access to these, right? But you can also define your own. So if you had, so you can define your own if you need to, or you can merge a few if you wanted to. So it starts with identifying what information you're looking for. So the customer I'm working with, they don't know what they don't know in terms of what's in their O365 cloud environment right now. They have an on-prem data loss prevention solution, but we haven't touched on-prem yet. I'll get to that in a sec. So in terms of their cloud environment, what do they have? And so what we were determining on the project was, what are the top 3 sensitive information types that you need us to implement in order for you to get that visibility, right? And they were credit card numbers, A, B, any passport number, and C, any national ID, just leveraging the out-of-the-box types, right? But you can, so that's what, that's how you, what am I trying to say here? That's how you flag those documents as containing sensitive information. You can set up policies to, once you found the information, once you know that a document contains a sensitive information type, you can apply a policy to that document, right? You can say you can't upload it, you can't share it, or maybe you can share it with select parties.
So when you say you as in the consultant, you as in the end user, or can you automatically apply these policies to these documents?
Great question, Frank. You can do either. You can manually apply these sensitivity policies, or labels, as they're called actually, okay, or you can have them automatically applied. And so as part of the engagement, generally Microsoft recommends that you start manual and then automate later, which is kind of how we normally do things in IT. But this customer, they didn't want the end user to be impacted or their workflow to be adjusted at any point as of yet. So what they wanted to do was have the labels applied automatically behind the scenes without the employee who handles this document to know that it's been labeled as such, so that they can get the telemetry and they can see, okay, this department's sharing this over here, and Bob's throwing stuff to outside the network. We got to talk to Bob about.
Can you run in like an auditing mode to see what happens?
You can. Yeah, you can. In fact, that's how you are supposed to. That's the flow before you actually implement it production. You run it in a simulation mode, okay, and then it'll say, we found 17,000 hits. Here where they are. And actually, on the topic of discovering the data, the Explorer tool is a really interesting tool under the MIP stack. So a document has a credit card number, let's say, right? And our solution has found that document. So you can have it shows up on the graph, shows up on the dashboard. You can get very granular as to who has the particular permissions to see where the document is and the contents of that document. In fact, the permissions are so granular, they're not actually even built into the compliance center currently. Those permissions exist in the old protection.office.microsoft.com. I forget the address. The old MTP portal, right? So maybe you have a compliance, you think about it like someone could build out a SOC, but for compliance, right? A GRC SOC, so to speak. So you could have your tier 1 guy or gal, and they could determine, there's a sensitive document and it's not meeting policy. And then you can have somebody with higher levels of access to actually see where that document is. So even like the folder path, right? Maybe it's like, C-suite's special secret folder, right? Mm-hmm. That information in itself is very confidential. So you might not want just anybody to know where the document is. And then you need a separate set of permissions to pull up a preview of that document in the Explorer tool to actually see where the offending match is on that sensitive information type. So you can get really granular as to who has access to what and how to report on these potential policy violations and data leakage.
So what happens go ahead, Edward.
Let me ask you a question. You said, and if you see me taking a bunch of notes, that's just a reminder for me to go back and check out some of this cool stuff, right? I security and compliance, I sort of cut my teeth, and I used to sort of do that for the team when Matt and I were on the same team. So AIP and MCAS were the things that I worked on, right?
Cool.
My S&C has gotten really soft. I'm not nearly at your level anymore, man. I started going over to the dark side with Frank doing this threat stuff. But you said something. You said explore, right? To be able to go look at these things. I'm assuming that you've deployed a solution somewhere, and that allows the explorer to do its job, because it's either looking at things that have been classified, labeled, and are tagged either manually and or automatically. And you were telling me I can go look at it in the old portal, but that's not the name of a product. That is just a feature inside the portal. I can go to Explorer, and then can I type in a file name and it will tell me anything about it, or do I just say, show me everything that's secret, show me everything that's been labeled or classified, show me everything that's been classified top secret, confidential? Is that how it works?
Yeah, well, it can work any one of the ways that you described it, and I'm just pulling it up in my demo lab right now. Okay. So we didn't, as of yet, this customer now wants endpoint DLP, monitoring their on-premise file shares and servers and endpoints, but that's not something I've worked on yet, but they're looking to implement that. So this particular project is just documents within Exchange, OneDrive for Business, SharePoint on.
Okay.
There's one more.
I get it. Teams.
Teams. Thank you. Yes. Teams. And so yeah, the Activity Explorer. Thank you very much for loading. Is a feature under data loss prevention, or a tool, I suppose, under data loss prevention in the compliance portal. And no, we didn't need to deploy anything. What we did need to do was, the first time you go into the compliance portal, and there's some easy documentation on this on Microsoft Docs. You just need to enable kind of the auditing mode so that the solution can see all of your stuff effectively, right? And then when you're trying to set up these different sensitive information types and policies and labels around them, you can say, like, yeah, include Exchange, include all the teams, include SharePoint Online, include OneDrive for Business. Or you could just say, hey, we only want to look for credit card numbers in Exchange, right? You can get granular with the repositories that these documents are stored in. And so, yeah, when you go into the Activity Explorer and the different dashboards, you can either search by the sensitivity type, like credit card number, or you can get more granular as to, like, show me everything that's matching in OneDrive, which is maybe multiple policy hits. So both of your scenarios are legitimate. Depends on how you want to utilize the tool.
So what happens if I try to open something that I'm not allowed to?
Okay.
Does the security team deal with that? Who deals with that, and how is that managed?
Well, I guess to answer your question and try to not give you the classic consulting depends answer, it would, okay.
Where does that data come up? The fact that Frank tried to open this document with super secret information. Where is that surfaced up?
Compliance.microsoft.com. There is a dashboard right on the main page, and it will show hits on policy violations that you've implemented. Now, you don't necessarily have to have a policy that restricts somebody from opening the file, but you can, right? So you could say, no, unless you're a part of Project Falcon, which is a made-up project that Microsoft likes to use in its demo environments. Unless you're in Project Falcon, you can't open the file, right? So you could set that type of policy if you wanted to, but you could also implement kind of warning messages. So maybe you open the file and you're looking to print it or copy contents. Similar to MCAS, where you can have those alerts that come up are like, hey, you shouldn't be sending this file to your personal Gmail. We're going to make note of this and we're going to give you a call. And you can set up the control, right? You can say, the user can bypass this with a reason, or you can say, no, user, you can't bypass this at all. This is a control, and we're going to restrict you. Similar controls and capabilities are available through the Compliance Center in that respect.
And you can also sit in Azure Sentinel, because there is a built-in function that has a query built in that looks at information protection types if you label and classify them. And if you have turn on the Azure Information Protection Data Connector and turn on enhanced logging, you can see that.
Nice.
I've used it before.
So let's say I have rights to the document, and I decide, you know what? Yeah, there's credit card numbers in here or whatever. I don't think we need this anymore, so I'm just going to delete the document.
Yeah. Okay.
Tell me about that scenario and how that's handled. Because you might actually have to keep that document since there's a credit card number there for 7 years.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
How is that handled?
Well, I mean, a lot of different items in that question. I guess you would also on the side want to have retention policies set up to ensure that any data deleted within your tenant that is labeled as such aligns to the retention policies that you previously defined. So hopefully you've done that ahead of time. But if not, deleting a file can be a control that you can prevent, right? You can be like, no, you can't delete that. It's highly confidential. You don't have the rights to do that. It's the same thing if you want to lower the classification of a document. So if it's highly confidential and you've given your users the ability to modify modify the classification of that file, you can either just say, no, you can't do that, or you can say, okay, you can do that, but you need to provide a business reason why you want to do that, right? So there's lots of granularity in terms of what you're going to allow them to do once that file has been, it's under the control of the solution, right? And that all comes down to, is the file encrypted based on the policies that we've defined earlier, which are based on the sensitive information types that we've identified as being part of those labels and policies. So,
all right. So my next question is, I'm sending an email. I put somebody's credit card number in there, or I attach a document that was maybe in an excluded area that has credit card numbers in there. What's encrypted? Is it the document? Is it the email itself? I mean, how is that managed if people are trying to move things around with email?
Well, not the best on the email side, because the customer I'm working with did not want to move ahead with this. But my next one is, so I'm going to have to skill up. But you can encrypt, you can encrypt the file itself, right? And you can, so even if that file was exfiltrated through, whatever means, right? The encryption and therefore the controls persist with that file even outside of the environment. So if you email yourself something and then forward it 3 times, and it's on your uncle's computer and you want to open it, you still need to provide credentials to access that file, right? It'll bring up a prompt. It'll say, okay, well, give us your creds, right? We'll see if you're allowed in. And it's using the latest encryption standards. So until we get to quantum, that's pretty locked down.
But
you can
somebody you can encrypt email. Somebody's like typing in a number in an email versus the document and then sends it out. You can, at that point in time, deal with the email through the information protection side, right?
Yeah, you can if it's Exchange or Exchange Online or certain versions, and it depends on the version of Outlook. I don't have that info in front of me, but I know there's a difference between Pro Plus and what is it? Office 2016 was the latest. Maybe it's 2019 now. Yeah, so there's a difference there, right? But yes, if you're typing it in the message itself and you've set up Office message encryption, yeah, you can stop that from being sent, as opposed to Gmail, where you would need something like MCAS, a CASB, right? Since it's a third-party SaaS app, technically, now you're typing in a credit card number, and that's the solution that would need to protect against that particular data.
Because Cloud App Security has a DLP engine to check for sensitive info types. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's
okay.
right.
And it also has the ability to pull in certain third parties, as well as sort of write your own, right? Similar to, not really regex, but you can go in and say, there's a DLP framework that I want to use. One of the things I like I said, I've gotten soft in this, but one of the things that keeps me sort of engaged is that within my and I'm looking for a keyword from you, Brodie, and I don't think I'm going to get to it unless I say it. I understand all the things. I've seen these things in action. I've had to do them when I used to deploy this, and I had to do it when I used to do those workshops, CIE. I think they call them something else now. But I kept listening for the code words, either Azure Information Protection and or Microsoft Information Protection. So I understand, because I've done it, that these are the underlying technologies that allow you to be able to do these things: monitoring, enforcement, remediation. You have explained where you go to see these things. So I think our listeners need to understand that within the E5 stack, those are the product specific. Like I was waiting for you to say something about, Azure Information Protection Scanner that can go out and scan your repositories and look for these different type of information types, right? But I had another question for you. So when you are, and I'm trying to figure out where Frank is going with this. And I've not done this in a while. I guess within it, you can have I think my expertise sort of ends around if you put it in a traditional Office document, I still know how to find it. I struggle with being able to understand that. What if I didn't? What if I put it in Teams, right? And I try to type, if I try to fool Teams by only putting
half of it.
You know where I was going with it, right?
Yeah,
Can it understand a pattern match and say, yeah, credit cards have 4, 8, 12, 16 numbers, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
4, 8,
I think
so I'm gonna put 4 in one chat, 4 in the next one, 4 in another one. But as long as they're within that same window, I would assume that the technology is intelligent enough to say, hey, I know what you're doing. Don't do that. Don't do this, Frank.
I would hope so. When I ran the workshops, the demonstrations that I would do showed the full number.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can fool the system by breaking it up. I suppose there's got to be a point where if you put in a digit and a bunch of text and then a digit and eventually got to 16, maybe.
I suspect it was. The best demo I've ever seen around that he still does it. It's once again Matt Sosman when he would do the power of Teams as security, everything from embedding sensitive information to a document or trying to obfuscate it by 16 IMs with one number each, right? It'll still get it, right? Do you deploy as part of your tool set in MCS? Do you actually go out and deploy Azure Information Protection, utilize MIP, things like that?
Well, I guess it would depend on the engagement, right? So I'm going to be now, and I don't know if AIP is actually, if they've deprecated that term or they're looking to do that now, because now they call it Microsoft Information Protection with Endpoint DLP. And I think they're getting rid of AIP. I used to play Microsoft Security Insights Bingo every time you messed up the new product names with the old ones, right? All the Azure threat protection and whatnot. They're also getting rid of Azure Information Protection, I believe, as a term for that solution, which looks for on-prem file repository, SharePoint on-prem, et cetera. Now it's going to be called, don't quote me on this entirely because it's in transition, but Microsoft Information Protection leveraging Endpoint DLP. So they're also doing kind of a name shift there.
Yeah.
Yes, I will be doing that for Windows 10 endpoints with this customer. They are looking for that on their on-prem SharePoint as well. Am I doing hands-on keyboard with this customer? No, they'll be doing it and I'll be guiding. But other customers, I could be the guy, with the access to do it. Right? It just depends on the engagement.
Bottom line is, if you install Defender for Endpoint, you're covered.
Did I say that aloud?
So, All right, one final question for you before we get to the tough questions.
Okay, good.
So what does the compliance products provide you in proving your compliance? Is there like reports or anything like that that I can use?
Oh, we lost Edward. Yeah, there's a pretty robust reporting system on the portal, kind of just like any other Microsoft.
You have like an audit thing so you can see where you line up, like Secure Score.
Yeah. And if our listeners, if you haven't been there and you've got access, there's no harm in just going there if you've got read only. You have a similar Secure Score, a compliance score, like you would a security score or a productivity score in your other portals. And you can also see, improvement actions. Like I've got my demo tenant up here. Enable self-service password reset, right? There's a lot of bleed over between security and compliance in that regard. But you can also look at how your environment, as it's known to the solution, aligns with GDPR, PCI DSS, general PII, HIPAA, so you can generate reports for your compliance team or for your CISO against what's been discovered through the tool. And if you've also enabled endpoint DLP solutions so that you can see so that it extends, right, that visibility to your on-prem environment, that also shows up in this same portal. So you've got everything kind of going to So that's single pane of glass, the term that
Does
everybody
the E5 license get all the auditing reports, or do you actually have to pay for those different reports?
The L word. I believe E5 gets you everything, but I'm probably wrong because it's a license.
they just changed it, so it only gets you like two of the different specifications or whatever out there. It's like I forget the exact two, but those are the they just changed. I don't understand the licensing now, but so some of the compliance reports you're looking for, you might actually have to look at paying additional licensing fees for that. So
I learn something every time I'm on Microsoft Security Insights. It's
I'm a licensing expert.
right.
Oddly enough, I lost video, then I lost sound, then I think I hit the stupid light. But let me ask one more question here.
Sure.
You at MCS, and you're deploying these solutions to a customer, hands-on, right? So you're in the field. How does this all come together with what Microsoft is advertising? And it's about to be an additional cost. It's already a cost, about to be even an additional cost, right? Insider risk. Because when you go look at the portal and start looking at insider risk, there's a whole bunch of good stuff in there. Everything from restricting USB access to documents and stuff. So do you work with insider risk, or will you be working with that?
Yeah, so when I end up deploying the endpoint DLP solution to this customer's Windows 10 endpoints, one of their asks was lockdown USB transfer, right? So that is part of it. And you know what? I was just poking around. I'm so happy you brought that up because under insider risk, I found a really interesting item, and I'm just looking for it.
You want to show it?
I do. I just want to make sure I have it up before I share, so I don't fumble around the portal while I'm being recorded live here. But let's see if I can find it.
And Frank, I had an interesting idea, and Brodie can be the very first one. I think Brodie needs to come back next week, because I want him to go through the portal and actually show this. I think that some people do not realize the power of what he does and the solutions that he does. Because I was playing around the compliance, I was looking at, it may not be next week, whenever, but he needs to come back and show us this stuff, right?
Well, I mean, I think that, are you ready, Brodie, for the screenshot, or?
No, I'm not, because they moved it. It's agile development, so things get changed all the time.
So first of all, what is insider risk? Is it people leaving things, or people cussing each other out on Teams? I mean, what is insider risk?
It's both, and funny story. So as I'm discovering this technology, I see the section which is eluding me right now. I'm sure I'll find it in the middle of the night in my sleep. But you go into this section on the compliance portal that manages insider risk, and it has a bunch of targeted bad words,
right?
Swear words, et cetera, et cetera. So I take, as I was ramping up, I was taking the AKMS compliance training, AKMS Learn compliance training, and it was talking about the insider risk solutions. And oh man, there's a video on it, and it was basically like you can determine if an employee could potentially be, a malicious insider. And they had a video where it's like Jane's talking to Joe, and Joe's like, "You are dumb and stupid," and then that gets flagged on the insider risk portal for somebody in people services or something, I guess, to then be like, "Oh, Joe is cussing out Jane. This could be a problem. Joe could, take a laptop home or start exfiltrating company secrets," right? And so I'm like, "Oh man, I didn't know that was a thing." And so, my wife and I were foul-mouthed often in our own conversations with each other. And she sent me, she'd send me Teams messages, and she was ranting about something one day. And I'm like, "Hun, can you drop the swear words on Teams? Because I'm 99% sure Microsoft's going to flag me as being like insider risk or something's happening there, right?" And I think that all goes back to, there's some controversy a little while ago about how much access Microsoft systems really had on employees and the information that they send back and forth to one another, and the how managers would have oversight, right, as of how much time you're spending in meetings, where you were spending your time, this, that, and the other thing. And another of the items was specifically your conversations with others and how those are being monitored, recorded, and reported against. And so I think that's a very powerful detection technology with great power comes great responsibility kind of thing, right? Because you could train that to do anything. You could say, if employees are dropping the code word like Project Falcon, that could hit and come up on the dashboard. And like Edward said, that could generate a ticket for your SOC using Sentinel, everybody's favorite SIM. And it gives organizations more visibility and control into potentially malicious activity, right? So it's very interesting.
So let me ask you, so from learning this, how did you like the SC400 exam and also the Microsoft Learn content around it?
I love the Learn content. I'm going to wait to write the SC400 until I think after my next engagement, because it covers the Office message encryption component that we omitted from scope on this engagement. And so I feel like after I do these 2 engagements and with a little bit of studying, I'll be able to write the exam. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm a big fan of the new SC exams. Specifically, I know you and Edward have talked about the 200 a whole bunch because you guys live in Sentinel, it seems like. And that's really cool because the MS 500 so broad and like medium deep because it was Microsoft's kind of first cloud security, not Azure related, but productivity and defender space exam. And it's so broad and medium deep that it's just so much coverage when you have to study for it. And it gave me a hard time the first time around. It took me 2 tries. So I like these new targeted exams where it's information protection, it's identity, it's SOC. I think that's the way forward because it kind of you're working in 2 or 3 solutions, you're specializing, right? And if you're listening out there and you work in a SOC for an MSSP or something, I think every one of your employees, if you're running Sentinel and Microsoft Tech, you should be doing the SC200, right? I think it's a no-brainer for your teams to skill up in that area. And the AKMS Learn content, I love it. As long as it's not walls of text and there's the interactive guides and the videos to kind of break up the text, I think that's great because I learn by doing, and not everybody has access to a demo environment. So those interactive guides, they're wonderful. They're just wonderful. Yeah, and they started actually quizzing you in each section and not at the end, which I also like.
What you'll notice about SC200 is that I realize that people would have a hard time getting a hold of a M365 E5 license. So that's why you'll see that the interactive guides and videos are really heavy over in those learning paths. And where on the Sentinel side, it's not heavy in there. One, the content was not there already, but also the fact that it's easier for people to spin up Sentinel and move through it in there. So what's the value of the MS500 to you?
I don't know if it's going to stand the test of time. I have no idea, right? This is just my opinion. I think we're going to get to more targeted exams down the road, and they'll eventually, the MS500 will be too broad. It's great for, I'm happy I took it. I'm happy I eventually got the certification because, as we were kind of talking about at the beginning of this episode, like I'm making a career out of Microsoft security solutions, and you can too. Anybody can, right? It's in demand, especially with this acceleration of digital transformation and security right now. So studying through the content and then writing the exam gives you a really good baseline across all the security solutions available that are not Azure related. Like there's even questions in there about SharePoint. Unfortunately, I hate those questions. There's questions about like kind of lighter Azure stuff like identity protection, PIM, MFA, groups, conditional access, all the M365 Defender stuff, starting with Defender for Endpoint, Edward's favorite, MCAS, DFE, DFO, DFI. And then even a little bit of external sharing controls. So it's great. It's great for the general Microsoft productivity security knowledge set. But I think down the road they're going to specialize more. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that the SC900 is a good course, but I actually think that anybody that's implementing, I think that MS500 is a better foundational course. To get going and then specialize in your other areas after that. All right, Edward, you said you were going to ask the question that we ask everyone a different way. So it's up to you to ask our most important question.
I asked in a different way. So Brodie, I have a very good understanding about what you do now, and what tools and stuff that you're running and what you're delivering for your customers, right? So within your realm of expertise, the customer say, "Hey, I got budget for one more product." Right. What product would you deploy to them? And so what I'm going to do is say, hey, regardless of the size, we only have budget for one more solution here. What would be the next solution that you would deploy outside the base solutions that you have? And if you need me to give you 4, I have 4.
I know what 4 there. Yeah.
All right. Would you say Azure Sentinel?
Oh.
Would you say Microsoft Defender for Identity? You already dev in Microsoft Defender for Office 365. That's just sort of so ingrained into what the products that you have. But I'll include that in there also. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to take that out because that's just sort of like the genetic makeup of a lot of the tools and stuff that you do. So let's go with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint or Microsoft Cloud App Security. You got one that you can do and say, okay, with the stuff I've already gone in and deployed to the customer said, before you leave, we found some extra money here. What other solution can you deploy that we can consult you in? We only have, let me give you something. We only have budget for about 15 to 20 hours worth of work.
15 to 20 hours. Okay. Well, I'd love to read the SAO on that engagement.
Because you burn up all the other hours doing your job.
Do they already have Endpoint Manager?
No.
Well, they must have a deployment solution of some kind, right? They've got a CCM or Endpoint Manager or something.
Oh, well, they bought E5, so or they have Intune/MEM or whatever it is. But they said one more solution.
Okay. So I listened to last week's episode last night, and I knew this was coming. I tried really hard to think about it unbiasedly, not to troll you, even though I really wanted to. And when you think about, Defender for O365, not my answer. We know that email is like the major, way in, right?
He threw in Sentinel now. He threw in Sentinel as another choice.
I know he threw in Sentinel, but honestly, I'd rather protect at the endpoint before it gets to the reporting capability in Sentinel. So in my opinion, especially with everybody working from home, I'm on a BYOD. And I've got Defender for Endpoint on here because it's joined to the Microsoft network. I'm working on a Microsoft Surface. I'm taking it anywhere. I want my endpoints to be protected before anything else, regardless of how it gets on. It could be a USB, right? That's how a certain nuclear reactor had a problem years ago, right? It was a USB device. So not necessarily the bad actors coming in through email or a phishing link, which Defender for O365 does a great job of. I want the protection on the endpoint. So regardless of how it got there, I want the endpoint to be able to determine that there's a problem and protect the user as quickly as possible before there's an issue.
Edward does not look happy.
Hold on for a second. Let's remove Sentinel, and I'll put Microsoft Defender for Office 365 back in. So now you got MDE, MCAS, MDO, and what was the other one? So all the M's. So which one?
You got 4 choices: Cloud App Security, Cloud App Security, Cloud App Security, or Cloud App Security.
I know
which one do you choose?
And I love Cloud App Security. Shout out to Sarazin and her team and the product team. Love Cloud App Security. But starts with endpoint. It has to start with the endpoint for me because it's users, right? It's users and their devices everywhere. And then the next 3 were the hardest, actually. The first one was the easiest one. And I really wanted to put, it was tough. I'm going to do Defender for O365 second because it's email. You get and it's documents. Like it's what we do. It's productivity, right? It's everybody, right? So, and then the next 2 were really hard. Defender for Identity, super cool product. MCAS, super cool product. I'm going to go with MCAS over MDI because some companies don't even have a local Active Directory anymore. Right? They're fully Azure AD. Maybe not enterprise customers, but definitely startups and new companies, they're fully cloud, right? So,
Edward, all I got to say is if you're not first, you're last.
Let me tell you something about what it is. Not only did he choose MCAS over MDI, he also went over his 20 hours budget. Right. So he fails this in right here. I gave him the parameters of 20 hours. So now he's going to go deploy MDE across 5,000 endpoints in 20 hours.
You didn't see how many endpoints there were.
I can do it. I can do it in 20 hours, right? Because all I'm doing is I'm advising. the local deployment team how
can.
to onboard those devices, right? And now I'm guiding them to use SCCM, MEM, whatever, to push the deployment out. And then I'm verifying that those devices are reporting back in. I'm not doing anything else other than advising at that point. So that's 20 hours. You can do that.
You can do it. Believe me, I pushed 10,000 in about 4 days. And that's only because they were all over the place. And we were learning stuff because the customer's never going to tell you the truth. They either don't know or they're just going to lie to you, right? Next thing you know, you find out they're using dial-up at a branch, right? So I get it. And I think when we go forward, I want to remove Sentinel. I'd rather have something taken care of before I know it than know it not been taken care of, right?
Protection.
So Sentinel has its place. But I think in the grand scheme of things, truth be told, and I'm going to make a confession here on live Twitch. I would go with MDE first, then I would go with MCAS.
Write down the date and time.
And then I would go with MDO, then I would go with MDI, and then I would go with Sentinel.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't need Sentinel if I don't need it. Right. It's supposedly supposed to be making me more efficient, right? A single pane. But now with the unified portal, I'm going to have to go ahead and go with MDE now. I'm really, you probably won't have to, you're the last person will probably get that question now. Because with that unified portal, now it's readily available. It's not just screenshots. Yeah. I'm like, okay, there are a few things that are missing, just a few. And it's maybe because I just don't know where they are, right? And the capabilities there. But I learned a lot. I'd like to have you back on. I'd like for you to be able to maybe have time to put up a demo and maybe showcase a few features, not everything. I think that our listeners got an idea of the capability and power of Microsoft Information Protection with DLP. But I would like for them to actually see the portal and say, okay, when you buy this, you get this. And we can't test every scenario, right? So maybe choose one or two things that you go out and you practice in and you want to show it. I'd like for you to come back on the show and show this, because Frank and I really were excited about you coming on, because we really need to get a better understanding with security and compliance. It's a big deal. I'm doing a lot of work with CMMC now because I'm working with agencies and federal. I'm starting to learn. I thought I knew, how hard it is to go in and initiate a NIST 800- whatever number, 53141 DFARS. I'm starting to see the CMMC control frameworks and matrices. You mentioned PCI DSS. I'm not foreign to that. One of my best buddies. That's all he does, right? Banking transactions. He worked for the Swift company. They did the Swift network for financial transactions, all that stuff, right? But we'd love to have you back. We're actually going to have some more security and compliance individuals that we have booked. So stay tuned for that. So you're going to see some people that do exactly what you do, just in different divisions, right? Super informative. I took more sticky notes than I have, so I'm going to go back and look at Explore, and I'm going to test out a couple of things.
Do we have anything to add to your to-do list here in Discord? What's your to-do for this week?
Figure out how to use this Explore inside the portal. And because I have AIP set up in the lab, and I want to see, and it hasn't gone away. So when you guys saw me looking to the left, I went inside my my tenant, and so other than AIP yelling at me saying, "Hey, you need to upgrade because we're going to the unified labeling," yes, which is already done, it's still there. It hasn't changed the name yet. So, yeah. But yeah, I think I saw some rumblings of MIP is the thing, and then the other things. But whenever you actually get, I tell you what, when you actually get to the project that you're going to be doing some of the insider risk, let us know. And when there's a good time for you to come back on and talk about some of the things you've done inside the insider risk, we'd love to have you back on. I think that's super important with data sovereignty, data governance, and then when you look at compliance, and then you look at what the Azure tools are doing, blueprints, landing zones, all these things that Azure Azure Defender for Service does as well as posturing, what you're doing is super important. There's a gentleman over at Microsoft, Matt Lillington, man, and he's a rock star in SNC, right? Working for Federal, and I'm learning so much for him. We'd love to have you on. So as soon as you get a cool project, you want to come back, come on back. Learn us up.
And Brodie's a moderator in our Discord, so everybody can ping him out there also.
Who's the moderator?
Brodie.
I didn't hear you. Oh, you are the moderator?
Yeah.
Oh, you the husky. You the husky dude. Yeah, okay, that's what it is, right? Oh, yeah, that's right. Right, I keep forgetting. So, good stuff, man. I'm gonna actually play with this a little bit just to go around in the portal and see what I don't see. I'm not gonna lie to you. In my lab, where I have the stuff sort of set up, maybe I need to build a server, or grab a document, go to one of these sites that have a gazillion credit card numbers, just throw it into a bunch of Word docs, Excel documents, PDFs, and start playing around with it and make it light Sentinel up and make it light my portal up, right? I used to have an AIP scanner on one of my machines. I don't know where it went. I moved and it died. I don't know where it is, right? Man, this is good. You have any questions for us, Brodie?
No questions, but I honestly wanted to say thank you. Thank you for the podcast. Thank you for hosting people. Thank you for, having these awesome conversations week over week. I know, Edward, sometimes you say it's just Frank and I rambling. It's great to have guests on, but I learn a lot. And I know there's a lot of people out there who are aspiring security professionals or heavily, been in Microsoft a bit, security for 20 plus years, and they appreciate the content that you put out. So thank you very much. Thank you for making it a podcast format so you can listen to it when you're walking your dog. Or I love the video content and demonstrations. I think going forward would be great because I'm a learner by doing. So I think that's a great option going forward. And yeah, your guests are awesome, right? Matt Soesman coming on was awesome. You've got a great lineup. You're going to do some guest hosts coming up. I just think this is a really solid learning platform, and I really appreciate everything you guys do. So thank you.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Do you think we should have Rod Trent back or not?
Rod Trent has not answered my Discord question. I don't know what the SLA is on Ask Rod Trent, but I'm pretty sure it's 2 weeks old now. I'm very sad. I'd love to meet Mr. Trent, by the way, but if he's going to keep dropping my question, then I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, careful what you ask for, man. Roger. Yeah, I'm just kidding. One other thing was we just want to make it fun. We like to share our enthusiasm with what we do for a living. It has afforded me and Frank a really nice living. We love it. So we share we share the good times and we share the frustration. How did I break that, right? But we also go, let me tell you something cool, man, what I did, right? So we do that. And I hope we bring something. I'm going to steal this theme from another podcast that I listen to is around financials. We are smarter together than we are individual, right? And so this is not just a podcast where we talk at. If you guys are following us, both guests, listeners, and everything, you need help, reach out to us. Right? Because if I help you, I learn something.
That's what our Discord is about. We have people asking us about certifications out there already. So sounds good.
Frank, what irony be that I passed the SC200 and you didn't?
Then
we should know here in a minute.
If you pass the SC200 first attempt, then we know that the test is flawed. So
flawed. Yeah, there you go. Well, hey guys, I hear the missus home. Yep. You are always welcome here, sir. If you're ever in the States or I'm ever in Calgary, you look us up, and if we ever cross our paths in some Microsoft function or event, we're
gonna have to all get together at the in-person Ignite when they have it again. We'll have a Microsoft Security podcast get together, so we'll definitely do that.
Yeah.
No problem. All right, gentlemen. Until next time.